Hello, everyone. Today, I'm here to talk to you about how you go from Figma designs to a working app with AWS Amplify Studio. I'm Renee. I'm the product manager for Amplify Studio, and I'm super happy to talk to you through this experience. Now, first, I want us to think about what does it mean to go from a Figma design to an app? Or really, what does it mean to go from a design to an app? Because there's an expectation where you have an idea, you meet up with your designers, your front-end developers, and your back-end developers, and then you deliver it to your customers. But there's often like a reality behind that where, oh, what happens if there's another change coming down the line? What happens if the developer pushes back or wants to make a different iteration? And in the end, it can become a kind of a mess in building an application, even though all we want to do is go from a design to an app. Now, what are the different intricacies that are happening here that is slowing down the development process? One part of it is that developers actually spend months pixel pushing. They make very small changes over and over and over and over again until the app is perfect. Even though they might have been specified earlier, but sometimes the attention of detail just requires that one more iteration. And then, in our survey, designers are also not happy with the process. In fact, 50% of the designers that we surveyed are not satisfied with the developer's implementation of designs. And so, in reality, the current UI development process is not great for designers, and it's also not great for developers. Both are frustrated. So what is the solution to this problem? The solution is, if we think about it, kind of like a magic box where we can put in Figma designs and get out React code. So your designers can operate on the things that they're most familiar with, like designs, and then they will get out React code that the developers can use. And that solution is Amplify Studio. So with Amplify Studio, we can just generate React code from Figma designs and make it as simple as import, export, and copy and paste. Now, what does that mean? Let's look at that in a demo. Cool. So here you can actually see a Figma design. It's a common design file that a designer would use. I've got a few components here. Today, we're going to build an app where we get to share all the best recommendations of places that I'd love to eat at in Seattle. And the best part here is this is a very real use case. I've met my team like last week for the first time in Seattle, and this is really, really cool. And this is how we can kind of share good ideas on where to go grab dinner. Now, from this design file, I have got like our usual components like the navigation bar, the app icon in here. It looks like a pie chart, but it's really an abstract picture of me eating. And then on the bottom, we've got a few components like the locations of the different restaurants, the details, and also like a beautiful rocket to kind of show when you have nothing going on yet, when you have nothing selected. So what a designer would do here is they would compose screens out of these components. So they would draw a big screen and say, hey, you know what? I want to make sure that I can get the navigation bar in there. And I want to make sure that the location is available in here and create maybe a list out of that. So this allows us to build this screen of this app fairly quickly, and this is what designers essentially do. And one other piece of it is, hey, we want to make sure that if the customer hasn't selected anything yet, it will just show the rocket. But maybe when there is a selection made, oh, that's jumped a lot. When a selection is made, we want to show some sort of a detailed information around the place that we're visiting. So in this case, I'm going to show details. There you go. OK. So essentially, to kind of recap here, we've got our components that we're going to be using. And those are really the things that Amplify Studio will convert. And we'll ensure that the developers have the freedom and flexibility to really lay out entire screens of those components. Now let's get these components into code. I'm going to first click Share on Figma, and that allows me to just get the link for my Figma file. And then I'm going to go to Amplify Studio and hit Build UI. And in here, I can just paste in my Figma file URL, click Continue. It's going to ask me if they allow Amplify Studio to access my file, so I'm going to say yes. And in this moment, it's now reading from Figma and sees, hey, there's quite a few things that I've set up. Like previously, I had a certain design system. Now I will want to make sure that my design system has these different brand colors and so on and so forth. I can accept those theme changes. And then I also get to see individual components that I've imported from Figma, and they look pixel perfect. So that allows us to really go through all of these workflows. We can maybe look at some and reject the changes as well. So the developer really has the freedom to kind of pick and choose what they like. At some point, here you go, you can see the app icon component, which is right here. And we can also see other things like the rocket component, which is right here, and they look pixel perfect in code. So all of this, I'm just going to accept all that and continue. Cool. So now that I have my component available in Amplify Studio, I can actually pull it down into my local code base to start building out my application. So in here, I've got, for instance, the navigation bar that we want to use to render on the top bar of our application. What I can do is I can just go in here, click Get Component Code. There's a little bit of a setup that I have to do the first time around. But after that, it's just going to be using every component like it is a regular React component. So first, you have to install the dependencies for the library to be able to use that UI. And then you need to configure the different pieces around Amplify. So I'm just going to copy paste this information into my code. So this I have to paste into my index.js file, and it looks like I've already done that. And then the second thing is I need to wrap my application around this Amplify provider, which is a mechanism for us to really inject the right theming information design system into your rest of your app. Now, let's use this component. And to use this component, I can run a CLI command, the Amplify pull command, to essentially download all these components that we've generated in Amplify Studio. Go in here and click on my terminal and run Amplify pull. And now it is going to pull a bunch of changes related to my application. Amplify Studio also does some backend stuff. We're going to talk about that in a bit. But very specifically right now, it's actually downloading a lot of the information around our front end. And in my React app, which we'll go and see now, we have this new folder now that's called the UI components folder. And you can literally see we have all these app icon code that we generate for you. So in this case, this is SVG, so it translates that as well. I think the other one we looked at is the location card and so on and so forth. And all of these are also fully typed so that you can actually get IDE suggestions as you use them. So now let me kind of give you a little walkthrough of the setup here. So this is my React app. App.js is kind of where I'll make all the edits, and then the edits will be reflected in this interface here in Google Chrome. So let me first import the top bar component. So top bar from /UI components folder, and then in here I can just render it with one line of code, and it's there. Now you might say, wait a second, this is not responsive. What's going on? You can see how the sign out button is getting cut off there. Well, the thing is actually, this is where Amplify Studio is super powerful, because in Figma, there's actually no designation for a UI component to be sticky to the window size. Whereas that's something that people are very familiar in doing in code. So to do that in code, it's as easy as just setting the width variable on it, and then put 100 VW. On here. And now it scales with my screen. The next piece is, wait a second, we had a variant of this that is supposed to be smaller. So maybe we should show that when you become responsive and go to a smaller screen size. So we also have a mechanism for that. We have mechanisms for you to define different breakpoints. By default, Amplify will ship with a certain set of breakpoints. And you can basically get those breakpoints values and then assign them a specific variation of your UI components. So in this case, I just imported a use breakpoint value hook. And that allows me to say, hey, you know what, there should be a variant parameter. Based on a certain breakpoint, like if it is small, I should map to the small version of this component. We can call it, and we know that it's called small because it's designated here in Figma. And then for all other cases, or medium and above, essentially, I want to make sure we can map this to default. Right? Now, if I go and set this component, the variation gets passed in. I can set the variant, and it's going to dynamically render based on the screen size. So if I get smaller, you can see how the font size gets smaller, and it pixel perfectly matches the designs of your designers. Now, the next thing we want to go into, and it's just like setting up the location cards, right? I'm just going to hard code a bunch of values here, and we're going to look at that in a bit. Oh, I didn't import that. So let me import the location card. So you can see how that is popping up now on the left-hand side. Let me zoom out. And then also, let me place in the rocket that we just had, right? And there you go. It all looks exactly like our designs because we can really pixel perfect generate all of these different elements of it. And also we have a set of primitives that you can get started with as well as part of your Figma design that allows us to have some more semantic information, like for instance, a sign up button. You can see how it hovers and becomes a cursor and stuff like that. So now at this point, let's switch back to the slides. Yeah, I just want to recap. What we have done here basically is making Figma designs into code by as easy as import, export, and then copy and paste. So it has never been this simple, and then also it's pixel perfect. So kind of really focus around streamlining the developer experience here. But wait, there is more to building an application, right? Because we just hard-coded a lot of like location information. We didn't show any of the detailed stuff. There's so much more to building an app nowadays. It's not just the UI. And front-end developers certainly don't just do UI nowadays. For that, I'd like us to kind of look at the evolution of the front-end development lifecycle. It all started like 30 years ago with the World Wide Web. Great innovation, love that. And since then, the technologies that's been developed has made the front-end development more and more interactive for customers to use. And this really has ushered in a change of how applications look like. In the 90s, Amazon.com, super cool site, but at the time, it was just a static content with a bunch of hyperlinks, right? And if we look at what applications look like nowadays, the requirements, the refinement on user experience, it's completely unparalleled. It's so important now. So companies like Airbnb and Spotify build these really rich applications, and it has a lot of the front-end pieces and the back-end pieces that really empower this as an interactive experience. And to look at that, what is the full stack application, right? There's the database, servers, and the API that connects them, and then obviously the front-end pieces around JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. And then in addition to that, there's been key innovations in each one of these sectors that really allow the front-end developer to take more charge in these experiences. Like serverless, that makes you not have to worry about servers, it's self-explanatory. Node.js makes the language the same for front-end developers and the back-end logic. And then also GraphQL made the API definitions just so much more streamlined. So there's this interesting industry trend where we're seeing that front-end developers are increasingly responsible for building the full stack functionality. And that is exactly what we built Amplify for. So Amplify is about making it easy for front-end developers to build full stack apps that are delightful, fun to use, and also making it just extremely fast to build. So if we really look at what Amplify offers overall, not just what we looked at in Studio for a second, we are really about how to help you build, ship, and scale your application. Building meaning your UI, your backend, and connecting those two together. Shipping meaning hosting it globally so you can share your application with the world. And then the third part is also really scaling into all the different benefits that being part of a larger team might give you, like giving you the ability to tweak the infrastructure details, or things like adding additional AWS resources that are not there by default in Amplify. So let's first talk about build, and then ship, and then scale. We're going to go through each one of them. On the build side, let's look at building the front end. And there might be a question around, hey, what if I don't have a designer? right? There's often times where there's a new project idea that you have and you just want to get started. Well, I have good news for you. So all these Amplify Studio generated components, they are actually based on top of our UI library. And our UI library supports theming. They give you UI primitives like buttons and so on and so forth. And also cloud-connected components that work really well with AWS. And to kind of show you that power and how that works, let's kind of go into a demo. Okay. Can I get my PC up? Thanks. Awesome. Cool. So let's look at these UI components that we can add here. So for instance, we might not be the best designer in the world, but we just want to have a button. And so you can just import the button component and start using it. And it works exactly like you would expect from a UI framework. So for instance, we're doing this recommendations guide of cool restaurants, and I want to add a button for it, and it's now there. And you can customize it even further to exactly the specification you want. In fact, if you look at our components library, there's all your usual suspects that's required for any application, as well as different input fields and so on and so forth. And then you can also customize the theme around these to really look like whatever you want. Fun fact, our documentation site is built with Amplify UI itself. Therefore, you can restyle it live. Love that feature. Cool. So with that, let's kind of go to the next part of it, which is how do we build out maybe more complex workflows that traditionally require the designer to figure out all the different states, like logging in. I think there's around 26 different states in just the sign in and sign up workflows. It's kind of a lot. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to show you how to do that with just a couple of lines of code, because we handle the front end and the backend connection piece pretty seamlessly. So in Amplify Studio, we talked a little bit about the front end pieces, but there's also configurations like authentication that I can configure. And before this demo, I've already kind of deployed an authentication backend that just requires email sign-in. In reality, we're abstracting away cognito user pool. So if you have an existing user pool, you can do all the same things as well. So you're not necessarily locked into the Amplify backend system. So now, in order to wrap my entire application around a authentication experience, all I have to do is import a function from our UI library. It's called with authenticator. And I'm going to scroll to the very bottom of my app. And this is basically what defines my application. And then I'm just going to say with authenticator, wrap it around 2 lines of code, and I have a login experience. And in here, I can create an account, I can sign in, I can forget my password, all the usual suspects of like really sophisticated login experience. Now I've already created a user account myself because creating a new account on stage is much more daunting. Oh, thank you, 1Password. There you go. Now I can sign in and access all this information. So with a couple of lines of code, you get a full sign-in experience in your app. And this works with Amplify created authentication backends or any cognito user pool that you have. Now let's go to the next part of this. What if we want to make this application even richer? I think we looked at, for instance, hey, right now there's a 0 state with a rocket, but what if we can just add like maps to this app, right? And so one of the things that we do as well is we allow you to import map views pretty much immediately into your code. You need to provision a quick backend using our CLI to run to create the backend resources. But once you've provisioned them, it again only takes 2 lines of code, and then your map view should render. And there you go. So we give you all of these different building blocks on the UI side, where you can start from the design and then really pixel perfect convert that, or you can use these really rich cloud-connected components to just hit the ground running. Now let's switch back to the slides. Okay. So we looked at how to go from Figma to code, and then layering in the Amplify UI library and these more cloud-connected components. But there's one part that I haven't shown you yet, which is super important, which is data. Like, how do you build in data to all of this? Well, I mentioned it earlier, GraphQL. GraphQL is a big part of Amplify. And what we are allowing you to do is configure your data model visually, or you can do it just through your graphical schema file, if you're familiar with that. And then you can set up authorization rules that work for like signed in users, specific users, owners of data, and so on and so forth. You can also use our content system to kind of look into your database, what kind of records there are, and add new additional records, and as well connecting it to the UI. So let's take a look on what that looks like in the demo. Let's switch back to the screen. Oh, excuse me, can you, thank you. Awesome, cool. So in Amplify Studio, there's this data tab, and we can click into that and see our data model. Now, I've already pre-created one just because I don't want us to wait around for a deployment, but essentially it allows me to visually configure the data model with a bunch of different fields and types and so on and so forth. I can configure authorization rules on the right-hand side. This is a visual interface for it, but you can always fall back to a graphical schema if you want to just look at that. And you can extend this using a CLI, using Visual Studio Code, and basically editing the graphical schema from here. Now, the other part of it is we have this capability to kind of look into the content of the application as well. So if you click onto content, it's going to fetch all the individual items from the right tables. And in here, you can see I've already created like 6 different recommendations of cool places to go to in Seattle. So if you haven't been to the Spheres or the Ballard Cut, great places, really, really fun. So all of this is in the database, but how do I connect this now to the UI? Well, I can go to my UI library, and let's look at some components that are relevant here. So for instance, the location component. Let me click in that, and then I can go in here and set a label for different fields and say, hey, it should match the recommendations label. And then this description should probably match the description itself, right? Oh, hit the refresh, the wrong timing. There you go. So you can actually see how there's real data streaming into here, and I can actually click Shuffle Preview to see how my component scales. Because a big part of why sometimes there's this little hiccup between design and developer is that the designer does not necessarily have the input on what are all the different data lengths and what like, is it a paragraph long, is it a one-liner and stuff like that, right? And we can now basically click through here and see, oh, okay, it works pretty well. Most of, yeah, this has 3 lines of code and just automatically scales. Good job, everything looks great. Then the second piece is I'm just going to make sure that we also do that for our details page here, where we got the same set of requirements. I'm going to set the image source here, so to set the cover image. Wow, that looks like delicious. And I'm going to set the name of the place and the address of the place. Let me look at that here. And then also the description. Cool. So in here, we can now see how this component starts scaling out and populating with real data. And we can, again, shuffle preview and see what it looks like with different interfaces inside. Now, this is cool to kind of look at one component at a time. But really where the power of all of this comes in is when we start also making collections out of it. Because a big part of boilerplate code, if you will, is actually writing the connection to the database, fetching the data, populating it. And then if you add real time into the mix, oh God, now you have to do an observation and then check for deltas and stuff like that. It's very, very complicated. In the end, you just want to have data in your UI, right? So what we allow you to do is to create a collection. In this case, I'm going to call it location collection in here. And that's it. It knows the data model from my backend. So it automatically populates it with the data set that I have. I can go in here, add additional features like searching stuff or pagination. But for my user interface right now, I don't need that. So I'm just going to remove them. And then now let's kind of bring all of this in now to the code base, right? So that we can make this app really, really rich. So let me go back to my trusty Visual Studio Code and go to my terminal. And we're going to run the command amplify pull again. And in this case, it's going to now start downloading all these UI components again, checking for where there are changes, especially, oh, now it has to connect to data. And it's going to go and look around that and make sure all of that code is also generated for you. One thing that we'll see in a second is the components we generate are completely real-time enabled as well. So as we add additional data, they will pop up. Okay, looks like this is complete. Now let me go and remove all this boilerplate code so that we don't have to look at that right now. And we can just import the location collection from our UI component library. Okay, there you go. And if I go back to my app now, you can see the data is already streamed in and it's already available. In fact, if I go in here and add new records, we can actually see that populated live as well. So let me go to my content tab in Amplify Studio. There's, it's going to fetch the items real quick. I'm just going to say, Sarita's favorite restaurant. And then Sarita is the SDM for Amplify Studio. That's going to be the description. I'm going to make up an address and then some random longitude, latitude information. Oh, that's not a valid number. 92.9. There you go. Now if I hit save, what will happen is it automatically populates there in my UI. I didn't refresh anything. I didn't have to do a hard refresh, didn't have to trigger a query or whatever. It just works because we're going to handle all of that connection logic for you, that population logic for you, and it's all real time. And actually, it's also working offline as well. But I don't want to disconnect from Wi-Fi for this demo. That sounds really risky. Now, if I go back in here and actually delete the record, it's also going to delete it in real time. So you actually don't have to worry about all the boilerplate code around it. And the reason we can do this is because of all the technologies that we've built on top of GraphQL. So now I've deleted that entry, and you can see how it went away as well. Cool. So now let's actually see how can we make this entire application richer in the sense of connecting it with the map view and making it just so much more intuitive, right? Let me bring back my collection. I'm actually going to set a CSS styling on here, just call it overflow auto. And the reason I do that is I want to make sure that this scrolls nicely on the side. There we go. Now it scrolls, right? And then what I can do is I can now actually handle on-click events on this list item. So for instance, let me first create a variable like const selection, set selection, which is a React state to just track what is the selection that the customer has clicked on, okay? And then I can go to my collections code and then say, hey, I want to override items. And in here, I want to get all the item information. And every time the customer runs on click, I want to make sure that I set the selection variable, like the selection the customer has made, to the item that was clicked on, right? So now, actually, I'm just going to console log this so we can all see it. So now if I go back to my application and I click on certain information, you can see how it prints out the information about the restaurants that I just clicked on. Okay. Now that I have that configured, let's try to show the map view dynamically. Because remember how we wanted to show the rocket if there was no selection made and then show the map once you made the selection? Let's actually code that up real quick. So first, I'm just going to go in here and say, hey, you know what? If there was a selection, excuse me. If there was a selection, right, we should probably show the map view. Let me do that. And if there wasn't, we should show the rocket. Okay. Now if I go back to my React app, oh, no selection made? Great, rocket, looks awesome. Selection made, map. Cool. So now this map is not really useful because it's kind of showing the entire world. We really want to make it contextual around these different restaurants in Seattle, right? So for that case, let's actually extend this map view a little bit more. I'm going to say that, hey, we first have to configure where the map should look at, right? So I'm going to set this view state variable. And again, all these components are typed, so I can actually check, oh, latitude should be the selection dot lat, right? And then the longitude should be the selection dot long. And then I think we need to work on some padding there as well, if I remember correctly. Is there a padding? Yeah, and I already created some default padding so that it renders nicely. Then I think there's also a zoom variable, and if I remember correctly, I created default zoom. Perfect. So now let's go in here and click on the spheres. And yes, that is around where the spheres is at, and that's also around where the Ballard cut is at. That's great. the next thing we might want to do is just put in a marker in place as well so that we can show it to the customers. So I'm just going to import the marker component from curve from React or map.gl. Was it that? Let me see. Oh, live coding is always very stressful. But it's a good testament of how our documentation is like, because if I can find it now, I think it's going to be pretty cool. React map.gl, thank you. Cool. Map.gl. I import that. Does it do its thing? Great. Now let me select it. Oh, that's not good. There. Okay. Oh, okay. It didn't. Of course, I haven't set the longitude and latitude. So now I'm going to set the longitude to the selection .long and then the latitude to selection .lat. So now if I refresh, it works. It's exactly where the spheres are at, and this is where the ballard cut is at, and so on and so forth. So with just a couple of lines of code, our application is already becoming more and more interactive. And then the next thing that we want to show is also how it works with the details card that we said, right? Like remember in our designs, our designer really wanted this one with the beautiful drop shadow to show up, right? And we can actually combine all of this to work extremely well with all of our with all of your regular CSS animations that you would set. So let's go back in here and make sure that we configure that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually have like a little view element that we're going to use. And that view element is going to have a couple of class names to it. So I'm just going to call it details. And I've already pre-created this details thing. It is just some layout code that configures that, hey, it should stick to the very bottom of the page. And then I move it away from the screen once it is supposedly hidden. So then if there is a selection, then we shouldn't show anything. But if there isn't one, there should be hidden. It's always good to talk through the live code as I'm doing this. And then if I use the details component, which was this beautiful component, I want to make sure I can pass in a recommendations value, and that can be the selection that the customer has just made. So one of the cool parts of this is we actually give you the item that you click on, right? And you can reuse that item in a different component. So you can actually pass it around and make sure that your UI always reflects the state that you are interested in. Cool, so now let's go in here. Animates up, isn't that cool? And you can click to a different one. You can see where all the restaurants are, and so on and so forth. And remember, all of this is also behind the login experience. So all of this is made in a way that just took us 33 minutes, and it is an entire application with map, login, real-time data, and yeah, I'm even excited, and I'm like working on this every day. So this is really fun. Now, let's go back to our slides because we're not done yet. So let's go to the slides. This is cool. The rocket landed on the moon, but there's a more philosophical question we need to ask here. What about this rocket that really needs to take off? Like, how do we make sure that we can ship our application? And shipping is really about making sure that your app is globally available, right? Really, just a URL and you can use it. So Amplify has a fully managed service called Amplify Hosting. And it's as easy as connecting your Git repository, and it's just going to build it. We're going to detect the build settings. If it's a React app, great, detect that. If it's an Angular app, great, detect that. And we also support Next.js. And with that, we actually create a continuous deployment pipeline for you. So every time you make a commit to your Git repo, we're going to make a new deployment. Every time you create a PR for your GitHub repo, we're actually going to create a separate subdomain so you can share it quickly with your friends and see if this has the right experience that you want. And obviously also, you can get a pretty easy domain set up as well. We give you a domain by default, so you don't have to worry about any of that. And then you can just add your own domain and use it later with whatever website you want. Now, the Git workflow is one way of doing it, but I'm actually going to show you another cooler way of doing it, I would say, like an easier way, a faster way. And for that, let's go to the demo. If we can switch back to the screen, that would be awesome. So in here, for those unfamiliar with how a React app works, there's basically a template I can get started with, and then I can run a command to really build my React app. So it's going to build it into a particular folder, and then it's kind of more traditional index.html, CSS, and all that thinking, right? And that's what we're going to go and deploy in a second. So now it's going to go and create that optimized production build, which is always awesome. So it's going to minify a bunch of things, package all the dependencies together so we're familiar with what they are, and it's going to put them all in the build folder. Let me run open dot. So this is the build folder. You can see. Now, what is the cool part about this is I can literally just drag, go to Amplify hosting. Oh, wow, that was a little bit too fast here. Go to Amplify hosting, which is our hosting service, and drop it in there, and it's now deploying the app. Like deploying a web app nowadays, it's practically like using Dropbox. Like you can just drag and drop it there. Now you can also do all the whole Git stuff and really make a production environment working. And oh wait, it just took a few seconds. Wow, this is really fast. And then you click on it, it's live. It really is live. And in fact, let me actually clear the cache from my computer. Then you can actually also start logging in. And I can show you that workflow as well. See how now the login workflow is in there. And this is all on a domain that we just created for you. You can bring your own domain, but this is one that we'll create for you. And if I log in again, it's just going to work. This is all real data, real backend. You can see how it's streaming in the data over time. And yeah, it just works. Now, let's go back to the slides again. Could we go back to the slides again? Thanks. Awesome. So we have built the app, and we have shipped the app. Now the question is, how do we scale the app, right? And how do I scale the app actually boils down into a question that is always on the top of people's minds, especially developers. The real question that you're asking is not how do I scale it, but it's always this ominous, is it production ready? So my answer is yes. And we're going to look at that in two different factors. First, we're going to look at the front-end pieces, and then we're going to look at the back-end pieces. So front-end piece, our UI library is production ready. It has all your usual suspects around buttons, these UI primitives that you can use, slider fields, expander fields, and all that stuff. We also allow you to customize all the studio-generated components as well. So for instance, if you want to customize a child element of like a component, you literally just have to pass in the name of that Figma element and just make whatever edits you want. It will just work. So it gives you all the flexibility that you would have normally had if you had coded this yourself. And you can wrap it further to change the API interface surface as well, and kind of take on forward from there. The other thing we kind of showed you today is how do you set up on-click handlers in code, but there's also a visual way of doing that that allows you to do your most common actions, like creating a form element, submitting a form element, deleting stuff, and so on and so forth. So there's a range of features you can kind of take advantage of there as well. And then obviously our theming capability and responsive components. Now, the thing that we touched upon a bit more lightly today is the backend piece, right? And there might be a question, is the backend production ready? Now with that, I first want to kind of just tell you a little bit about our philosophy and how we're thinking about this problem. So our goal ultimately is to create the best front-end developer experience. But we don't believe that that is a sacrifice in the extensibility of your backend. We really don't. Backend as a service offerings traditionally are completely fully managed. It's completely opaque to the customer. What if there's just one infrastructure setting that you need to change just for your app to be really, really compliant for your use case, right? But you can't because it's fully managed. You cannot, right? That's not how Amplify works. Amplify actually deploys all the backend resources within your account through CloudFormation, so you get infrastructure as code, you get all these different optimizations you can then make yourself as well. And with that, we really believe we can create an experience where you have a great front-end developer experience, yet with the extensibility of a self-managed backend. Now, we have actually analyzed what people are thinking about when they mean extensibility or when they mean production readiness. And we looked at hundreds of companies, and they they always go through 3 different phases of extensibility. They go through the phase of modification, adding new resources, and exporting. Let me go through one by one. First one is, how do I modify an Amplify generated resource, right? Like there's this one setting on Cognito user pool that I need to tweak that's not exposed in that visual interface. How do I change that? Well, you can run Amplify override off or override any category. And we actually give you the infrastructure details there to kind of tweak every single knob that's available, every single knob, okay? And there's my favorite setting, because it's a very long name and it's a real setting, is the minimum password validity days incognito user pool. Yeah, you can tweak that. The next thing is, how do we add additional resources? Amplify gives you all these, great best practices by default, like your GraphQL API and so on and so forth. But there's 175 plus AWS services. And your use case might require one of them that we don't support. And that is okay. We allow you to add custom resources through CDK, make it actually work with our full stack CI/CD solution that supports multi-environments, and also reference all the existing Amplify backend resources as well. You can really tie in together things like SQSQ with a Lambda function that you provision through Amplify, and so on and so forth. With Amplify Add Custom, you can really take advantage of the full depth and breadth of the 175 plus AWS services. And then the last part is Amplify Export. And this is really the most advanced use case. Customers like Amazon Music, Rivian, are using Amplify Export. It allows you to export the Amplify backend as a CDK construct and incorporate it in your own CI/CD deployment pipeline. So if you have a centralized deployment team, right, like Amazon Music has, that already has everything built on top of CDK, you can actually just run Amplify Export and give you a CDK construct to deploy. And this also allows you to do multi-region, multi-account deployments as well, so you can really, really go advanced here. To give you some sort of reference, Amazon Music has over 100,000 transactions per second. It's a big app, big pipeline, and we support that. So, talked a lot about the back end, but this talk originally started from the front end. And when we were looking at this entire workflow, really, we needed to talk about the full stack. And in some way, we looked at the frustrating UI development process that exists today. But I really hope that today, when you leave, you can take away that we can finally say goodbye to the frustrating UI development process. And I really mean it. I got an animation there going. So bye-bye. Okay, good. And with that, I just want to let you know that you can get started for free today using amplify.aws/studio. All the pixel perfect Figma to code conversion is available for free. And I'm going to hang around here for any questions that you might have, and you can find me on Twitter as well. Thank you. Cool. Any questions? Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, how does Amplify do the database, how does Amplify do the client to API to database connection, right? So let me kind of show you that on my screen. So if we can switch back to the Mac, that would be great. Yeah, okay, cool. Let's go through that a little bit. So we do give you a simplified interface here where you can visually configure a data model. But in reality, what we're doing is we're creating a GraphQL API in the background, right? So this GraphQL API is powered by AWS AppSync, and then we're storing all the database in DynamoDB. And they're all deployed within your own account. So you can actually take it forward from there. And then secondly, to your question, like how does it interface with external systems? One of the things we allow you to do is write your own custom resolvers for these APIs. And that essentially allows you to extend it with Lambda functions that can go and talk to any sort of other AWS service that you would want. And other AWS services can also call this AppSync API and trigger additional things that you might need. Does that answer your question? Oh, yeah. So we don't offer a visual interface for setting up your REST API just yet on Amplify Studio, but you can always use the Amplify CLI to kind of extend these and create additional REST APIs as well. So one of the good parts is that Amplify Studio gives you this visual way of using it. It's point and click. It's just a little bit simpler. But if you really want to go advanced and create your, do things using CDK and so on and so forth, you can use the Amplify CLI and extend that same project. And these systems talk to each other, so they're aware of each other. Yeah, it will show you the documentation for it. So there you go. Yeah. And if you have resources, you can actually see those resources here, and we'll link them to API Gateway and stuff like that. Yeah. Cool. So the question was, how do I create different workflows behind all this database table? So I think there's a couple of things to tease apart there. There is the element of just the, how do I model my data when there's some sort of level of relationship between them, right? I didn't show that in this demo because I wanted to keep it simple, but you can essentially create additional data models, and what we're gonna do is we'll allow you to visually configure these different relationships. And all of that works with DynamoDB in the background. And we'll do the right API resolver logic to kind of combine the things together. And then the second part of it is, how do I now build workflows that might go and first talk to the favorites table and then talk to the recommendations table? So one of the best parts here is that all of these are deployed within your account. And actually, we also allow you to add a Lambda function, and you can just call all these resources as if it's another Lambda function you would set up. Correct. So let me just tease that apart a little bit. The question was, where is the data stored and how does that workflow work? So the data is stored in DynamoDB, period. That is where we're storing it. Amplify is just putting together all of these different services and surfacing it in this way. We're not creating additional database resources ourselves that we are fully managing. It's actually all deployed within your account. In fact, if I go to the AWS console and look for my DynamoDB tables here, we will actually find them. So they will exist. You can see how we have I think the recommendations, what we called it, right? So I can actually find my database table that we just looked at here. And this is the ultimate source of truth. And the good thing about Amplify is we're deploying all of these things within your account. It's not abstracted away completely from you. If you want to write Lambda triggers for it, you can. There's all these different things you can build on top of here without restrictions. Okay, so I guess your question is more, can you connect existing data sources to the APIs that we generate? Is that the right thing? Okay, sorry. Yeah. So what we actually allow you to do is, yes, connect to it. But then you end up having to write some of these resolvers yourself, that logic that does the connection to the database, right? So how I would do it is, in GraphQL, I would do a thing called a mutation or query. I would essentially write that and then say, hey, you know what? I want to handle that request through HTTP, or VTL is one of the languages we support to write resolvers in, or just call a Lambda function that maybe talks to an existing data source. So there's these different mechanisms for that. And in order to make this also work with offline and real-time capabilities that handles conflict resolution, stuff like that, we have a dedicated blog post on it. So that's also something you can check out. Happy to share that after the talk. Cool. Any other questions? So the question was, what are the front-end IDEs, essentially, that we support for all of this? So one of the best parts of Amplify Studio is as long as your IDE understands how to work with React, essentially opening a text file in this case, really, it is supported. So I prefer Visual Studio Code with some customizations for my own, but you can use any editor, really, that can do web development. So the question is, do we support other UI frameworks other than React? So today we only support React. It is on our roadmap to support additional frameworks. What we just want to make sure of is that we really can capture the complete use case first with React, and then we can develop additional frameworks downstream. We have developed everything in a way that allows us to easily go to a next framework. We just really want to stay focused on React for now. Yeah. Excuse me? What kind of testing do we support? Okay, so testing, very, very, means a lot. Let me unpack that a little bit. There's the UI testing capabilities, and then there's around, like, how do we test with backend, like with the backend data, right? So on the UI side of things, these are just React components. We wanted to make sure the components we generate are basically code you would have written yourself, right? So you can use any popular React library, for React UI testing. That's one. And on the backend side of things, what we actually support is like a mocking API. So you can actually run a command called Amplify mock, and then it's going to create a local mock GraphQL server where you can send data back and forth in. You can actually store data. We can also mock S3 in a way that allows you to quickly kind of iterate with it and then run tests against it, right? The other thing that we've seen is that for some tests, you really want to have everything deployed in the cloud, right? So Amplify actually supports multi-environments. So it is very, like in the studio interface right now, I only have the staging environment, right? As you can see here. But in reality, if I go to my console again, sorry, let me just click back. I can go to my backend and say, hey, you know what? I just want to clone it and have a pre-production stage. That's like as easy as that. So if you want, we can actually clone it live. Let me call this prod. Yeah, now it's cloning my backend. Cool. Yeah. So the question is, does Amplify generate serverless resources essentially to help provision all your backend, all these things? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. There are some capabilities that will explicitly tell you that are not serverless that might incur a different cost structure, but 99% of the capabilities are actually serverless. So it scales both the business and your users, and the cost structure behind it scales as your business grows. So it's actually super cool. Yeah. So DynamoDB is our default, right? We are adding more native support for additional data sources in the future. But right now, you have to essentially write a little bit of code to connect to other data sources, like RDS and so on and so forth. And then there was another question around what is the front end that's supported with Amplify? So I should have actually clarified earlier. So Amplify Studio, like the UI code generation, that is only React. But we have libraries for all your usual suspects: Android, iOS, Flutter, React Native, React, Angular, Ionic, and all these things, so that you can actually talk through other clients as well. So just a UI generation piece is restricted to React for now, but all the other capabilities to connect to your backend, where you have to write the UI a little bit yourself, that is available pretty much on every platform. The question is, can I take this build folder and run it in an EC2 instance? And the answer is yes. Yeah, it's basically index.html and like CSS and stuff like that. Yeah. Well, so Amplify supports DynamoDB, so that's our default actually. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? So the question is, can it also be on S3 as well, like your website? And the answer is yes. So we actually support a workflow that puts it with CloudFront and S3 and packages up together for you to deploy. But if you're using it with Amplify hosting, you get all the CI/CD benefits for free, essentially, right? You get you can connect it to your Git repository, make sure that whenever the developers make a change, it automatically creates a new build. Like all of that requires maintenance usually to set up manually. And if you're wondering around scale, like why is there going to be any scaling issues between CloudFront S3 versus Amplify hosting? And the answer is there shouldn't be any difference because in reality, Amplify hosting just manages the CloudFront distribution and the S3 bucket for you. And that allows it to kind of scale essentially at the same pace as S3. Yeah. Cool. I think those are all the questions. Thank you so much.